Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to yet another fantastic, I know it's going to be a fantastic, Devtoberfest session. So welcome to all those who are already in the chat, all those viewers waiting. And so it's Friday. It's the end, or just the start of Friday, the end of the third of the 4 weeks of Devtoberfest. We hope you've been having a great time this week learning. So we had a session, a premiere session earlier today, metadata-driven development. This is front-end Friday, by the way, so everything is related to front-end development. And this session right now is going to be given to us by the wonderful Marius Freitag, who is a friend and colleague here at SAP. I'll hand over to Marius in a second. And Marius is going to be talking to us about TypeScript. How strange. TypeScript has been having this huge growth in interest, adoption, not least in the UI5 development world, but Marius is going to talk to us specifically about TypeScript coming to SAP Fiori Elements app development, which is super intriguing to me. So before I hand over, good morning, Arun, by the way, and say good morning in the chat, by the way, ask questions as we go along. If it's appropriate, I will interrupt Marius with the questions. Otherwise, we'll save some of the questions until the end. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat anytime. Louise, good morning to you. And I've just put the link to the Devtoberfest events calendar in the chat as well. So use that link to get to the other sessions that are going to be happening today. The next one after this is in 2 hours after this finishes. And it's Craig Schmehill, wonderful Craig Schmehill, going to be talking to us about the new home for SAP community. Anyway, without further ado, let me now hand over to the wonderful Marius. Marius is going to start sharing his screen as well, and I'm going to go silent. Over to you, Marius.
Yes, thank you. Let's try to get the screen running. Yes, perfect. Okay, thanks for the introduction. As said, I'm Marius. I'm from SAP Fiori Elements for OData v4. And today, let's actually talk about SAP Fiori Elements, SAP Fiori and SAP Fiori tools. It's time to use TypeScript. That's what the subtitle says. And as we also heard before, it couldn't be more true for the whole web engineering world. It also couldn't be more true for UI5. We also heard from last UI5Con that this is a thing now. TypeScript is there to stay. There's nice tooling and everything. But it's also true for SAP Fiori Elements and SAP Fiori tools. And we will explore and discover some of that in a demo today. I will mostly try to do live coding, try to not focusing on too many slides. And I can already promise you today there will be a demo that we've never done before. Today we'll be doing a different use case, which is focused on custom apps. So we do a lot of coding in custom TypeScript, but still reusing a lot of things from Fiori Elements. Before I can start with the demo, I just want to get you up to speed so that you understand what Fiori Elements is all about, how we got here. And then we can directly dive in. So if this works, yes. So you might remember a few years ago, a lot of years ago, actually already, there was a big push for new web applications to be developed. In SAP and the SAP ecosystem, of course, the technology of choice for this is UI5. So a lot of UI5 apps were being created inside of SAP. While doing this, we realized that there are some patterns which are always recurring. Things like we need a page where we can display different objects, like a list of objects, and many other things. The issue with these standard or common use cases was that every developer had to create them all over again. So there was a lot of manual effort in recreating the same functionality all over again. And this also caused UX inconsistencies because everybody did it kind of different, which caused it to look kind of the same, but also kind of different. To solve these issues, something that is now called SAP Fiori Elements was created, which basically has the vision or the mission to support applications in focusing on their business logic, on their differentiation, and leaving all the rest to the framework. But let's look at one of those typical page patterns we see. Right here, we see what we call the object page. It's basically details for one specific object, for one entry, and it usually has the same pattern. It has some kind of header, and then it has a content area with different sections like forms, tables, or charts. And as this appears many, many times, it makes sense to generalize as much as possible. The great thing about this template, or as we call it, floor plan, is that if you want to reuse this, you don't have to do any custom coding. You don't have to define the layout, do any controller coding. You can just use Fiori elements and configure it a little so that Fiori elements knows what data to display, and then you're basically done. The way you can configure Fiori elements and make sure that your correct data is displayed is by using OData v4 annotations, which are a form of metadata you can define on your OData entities and OData services, which you can use to describe things like consumption hints, semantics, or behavior definition. And that's really all you need to do. So on a declarative way, you can tell Fiori elements what data I want to display, and then Fiori elements knows how to display this data. There are also other floor plans, for example, the overview page, list report page, and in total, they are meant to cover most of your business scenarios. So for most applications, you will be able to use those floor plans, combine them so that your application is very efficiently done. But of course, we can only cover most of the business cases because Fiori elements cannot do everything you will ever try to do. And also you will probably have some kind of differentiation factors or things that not all other applications use. To also enable you to still use floor plans, we have the flexible programming model. Looking at the screenshot we have here, we see we have 3 pages displayed next to each other that have some things going on. There's some visualizations, a lot of information. Looking more closely at this, we see that a lot of custom elements are used. We have a custom column, a custom header facet, a custom section, or a custom page. And these custom things are usually your own XML fragments you can plug into the floor plans to do your own visualizations, your own logic. A custom page even goes a little bit further by also allowing you to define a view and controller where you can do virtually whatever you want to do. But opening up those extensions causes another issue because while on the floor plans, all the controls we're using are harmonized, are consistent in the UX and behavior, do have support for accessibility tools and many other things. The things you do in the extensions, you're on your own. You have to create your own controls, use your own controls, make sure that everything is being integrated. To make developing those extensions easier, we also started publishing building blocks, which are kind of those bigger reusable artifacts, which are metadata driven, just like the floor plans are, but they're extracted from the floor plans. Or the other way around, the floor plans are composed of different building blocks. And now we're making them public as well for you to use so that you can compose your own layouts or use the building blocks in your extensions. Typical examples are the table, filter by form, but there are many more. You can find them in the Flexible Programming Model Explorer. You can actually just Google this and you will find it on Google, but we'll also look at it once I start with my demo. To quickly summarize, SAP Fiori Elements brings many benefits to you. There's, of course, the point of developer productivity, because you don't have to do everything from scratch, reinvent the wheel. Enterprise readiness, because the applications are building on well-known and well-established patterns that just work. UX consistency, because you don't do everything all over again, so also the controls that you reuse are the same. And there's a rich tool support, and some of that we will see in the demo. Talking about the demo, I think it's already time to start coding. I want to develop a custom TypeScript-based application with SAP Fiori tools, SAP Fiori elements, and the flexible programming model. And today I want to go completely custom, so I don't want to use any floor plans. I want to create custom pages and implement my custom use case. With this, let's go into my Visual Studio Code instance. I'm using Visual Studio Code locally. I could also use the Business Application Studio, which would come with the kind of same developer experience, but I'm doing it locally now. I have the SAP Fiori tools installed, which you can get for free in the extension store, which helps me with generating and configuring my applications and doing a lot of my development tasks. As in many demos, I already have a CAP project, that is a Cloud Application Programming Model project running, which helps me with creating some sample database, some OData services, some entity I can build my application on. The use case we have here is the S-Flight use case you also might know from other sample apps or demos. But today we will not be looking at the main entity that's usually used, but we will looking at passengers. We want to create an application that helps us to easily maintain new passengers, which can then be, I don't know, assigned to some flight bookings, to some airplanes. But this application should really be about creating passengers. I won't really go into detail of the exact requirements. We will develop them once we go so that we can directly see just some coding action and then evolve from there. So with this, let's start with the app generation, because right now I don't have any app here. I only have CDS files, which is the metadata for OData. So the first thing I want to do is opening my command palette and executing the application generator. This now shows me a nice wizard, which brings me through the steps I need to fulfill in order to create a new application. I want to create a custom page. I could also use some floor plans like the list report overview page, but for today, I want to use a custom page. Then we need to connect it to some OData service. We could use an ABAP system, an OData service running somewhere, also other things, but I want to have a local tab project. This is also automatically detected, and my OData service is also there, which is called travel service. My entity will be passenger because I want to create new passengers here. And then I need to name my application. I will call it maintain passengers, hopefully without typos. Maintain passengers. And the description, I mean, we can change it. We don't have to. Let's use 1.119. It was released yesterday, but everything should still work. And I want to have, of course, TypeScript enabled because that's kind of the point today. In order to use TypeScript, we need to have some tooling. Especially, we need the CDS plugin for the UI5 tooling, which kind of connects the UI5 tooling with the CDS tooling so that we can have things like live reload, TypeScript transpilation, and so on. We only have to do that once for each project, and then we're able to use TypeScript. Okay, let's finish this up. The wizard will now generate all the files that we need. The new app is already being created here, and it installs npm dependencies directly for us. So that was actually very quick today, but let's ignore this for now. The application itself, it's a normal UI5 application. We have a manifest, we have a web app, it follows best practices, but we also see that there's a TS-config and ESLint, Babel, all the things that we need for transpilation, which follows best practices, latest standards, which is automatically integrated also in the development server. Also the files, the JavaScript files are no longer JavaScript files, but they're TypeScript files. And we also see, because we have a custom page, that we have our own main view and controller generated, which is also in TypeScript. And there are also many things we will see in a few minutes. So now we can look at the page that already opened, which is the application info. It's kind of the main page of an app in Fiori Tools, where we can see some status information as well as things that we can do. The first thing I always do is previewing the application to see that the generation was successful. This will now start the CDS and UI5 tooling in the background. It will set up transpilation, it will set up mock data and in-memory database, and it's already there. It works. It looks kind of boring because we don't have any content, but that's kind of expected because we have a custom page. And how should Fiori Tools know what to put in the custom page? So that's, of course, our job now. So maybe let's directly start with that. Let's try to breathe some life into this main page by adding some controls. I'm going back to Visual Studio Code, and let's go into the main view because that's the visualizations that we see. We already have a page with a title. That's also what we saw. But now let's add another set of content. As this is about creating a new passenger, my main control will be a button. So I can directly create this. I will just call this create button, and I can give it a text, which will be create a new passenger. And I'm also already defining a press handler, which is on create press. And there are some stylings I want to include. I just now used the Visual Studio Code snippet. I will do this throughout this demo to speed up the process a little, but you always see what is being typed into. We'll quickly talk about it. And this just makes it easier to focus on the very important things. So let's have a look. The button is there. Of course, it doesn't do anything. We will do that in a minute. Don't worry. But before I implement this, I also want to add something else to the main page. I want the creation to be the focus of this page. So I don't want to have a list report, which would have the table in the foreground, but I still want to be able to see my created passengers because I don't want to do a fire and forget. I still want to be able to edit them as well. But to make sure that the button is still in the foreground, I will hide the table away in a panel, which is collapsed. So this is just a normal panel with some header. It's not expanded, but it's expandable. And we can also see it's here. It's automatically reloaded, but no real content. As content, I now want to have a table. In best case scenario, the same table we also have on the list report, maybe also a filter bar. I could now just use as SAP M table, but then I would have to do data binding and everything on my own. So this is a perfect use case for me to use the building blocks that I already mentioned. So let's try that. You could just Google for the FM Explorer, or you can go on ui5.sap.com, go down to Tools, and then you find it over here. The advantage of accessing it via the tools is that it will always stick to the version that is also configured. So if I choose another version, I'll also see another version of the FBM Explorer to see what building blocks are available in this version. So we can open this up, and this is kind of this live running app, which is a documentation and gives us some live samples. I want to look at building blocks, and I'm especially interested in the table building blocks. So let's open a sample. And each sample project is usually structured in a way that we have a live running application on the left side and the coding on the right. The good thing is I can even change things here. And it will, okay, let's just say hello. It will also update on the left side. So we can even use this to prototype some things already to see how the building blocks work in action. And then we can copy it into our own project or even download it completely. I just want to copy the table here. And we can get it in here. Maybe do a quick line break to see more. Each building block, and that's a pattern we usually see, is that we have a meta path, which shows to some path in the meta model. Remember, I said we are working on OData v4 metadata or annotations to correctly render the page and the controls. So right here, I also want to refer to an annotation. We just can use the default line item here. That's fine. Read only is also okay, and I will just pick a different ID. We can see if it works. It does. So it already displays 5 passengers. I have here as sample data, but I also want to have a quick filter bar. So let's look at the filter bar sample. Trying to find it here, over here, just copying this over. And this probably should be above the table. We don't need all those event handlers. We can, again, change the ID. And the meta path, again, our entity is called differently, but we can just use the selection field annotation from the context. It's already there. For the filter bar, I also want to enable live mode so that we don't have the go button. And I want to connect my filter bar and my table using the filter bar property so that the filter bar can actually filter the data that is on the table. Going back to my application, we should be able to see it now. Yes, we do. We also have no go button, and let's see if the filters work. Yes, they do. So it's just that easy to use building blocks. You can just add them to your view, connect them, and they automatically have all the behavior that you want. And it's not just about the things that we're seeing here. It also comes with some enterprise features that you're used to on other applications. Like we can add new filters here, which are then displayed, and we could, for example, search for first name here. So all of these things are just there by using the building block, which is also used in the list report. But that's not our focus, so let's collapse this again. And let's try to start with some implementation. I want to create a new passenger. So I want to do that something happens when I click on press here. So let's go back to my main controller. I already have an event handler defined, so I just have to implement it. This file itself, it is TypeScript. It uses the latest syntactic things. We can use all the patterns that we used to when using TypeScript. Also, the class syntax is the normal TypeScript syntax with extensions and everything that we know and love. So my function will be async, and it's called, I think, on save press. I don't want to have a breakpoint here. And this returns a promise without anything in it. And now I have to do the actual heavy lifting. I have to do some kind of implementation to create a new entry and maybe even display it. As this is OData v4, and as this is just nice for UX, I want to use draft handling. So I don't want to create an active object directly, but I want to open a draft which can be changed and then saved or discarded. If you've already looked at some draft orchestration things or how the request works, you will see that there's some contracts you have to fulfill. It's a kind of hard choreography to implement. But luckily, we are in the Fiori Elements context, and Fiori Elements provides in custom extensions or custom controllers something that we call the extension API. This is a collection of different APIs you can use on an abstract level to reuse some functionality from Fiori Elements. In our case, we want to use the edit flow, and we do have a nice function which is called save create document. Actually, why did I call this on save press? It's weird. Oh, it's on create press. Yep. Lucky that I found that out. A create document. And we do have TypeScript. I mean, we already saw it. I'm typing and I'm getting recommendations. It also shows me what kind of parameters I need. I do need the binding, which will be passenger. And we also need a parameters object. And it tells me I need a creation mode. I want to have the new page creation mode here. And as this is asynchronous, I want to await this as well. To make sure that the table is also updated with latest data, I will just quickly get the table and also refresh it just to make sure. So let's get the table. I believe we already assigned the table ID. And let's tell TypeScript that this is a building block table. On this table, we can then just say we want to refresh. Okay, let's go back to our application and see what happens. No, that's not the application. We're here. So whenever I create a new passenger, we see a new object is being created. So this seemingly works. The table is updated, and it even already tries to navigate to that new passenger. Obviously, we only have one page, so the navigation won't do anything. But I think that's something we can add now, because we obviously want to have a way to input data, to see data. So let's add a kind of second page. The easiest way to do this is by using the page map, which is part of the Fiori tools. We can see it in the application information and open the page map right here. The page map, I mean, as the name suggests, it's basically a map of your pages of your application. Right now, we only have one page, which is a custom page, but we can easily use this to add new pages. The easy way out, yes.
This is maybe a good time to interrupt with a couple of great questions just before we create a second page, if that's okay. So first is from Matt Harding, a very specific question, but a very interesting question. Is it okay to use TypeScript for production use on 1.108 S4 2022 UI5 version? Now, you know, I wouldn't have no idea of that in my brain right now, so we might have to get back to Matt, but I thought I'll relay that question to you right now.
Yeah, same with me. About the concrete version, I think we will have to discuss this. Maybe you can leave a comment on the Devtoberfest site, because we will look for those, and then we can respond and come back with the actual versions. Perfect. Of course, with each later version, you will get new features here. But yeah, maybe you can ask a question there and then can come back to you.
Great stuff. Yeah, that's a good idea. And one question from Louis. Louis is, I think, wins my prize for the most number of sessions attended and most number of questions asked. Well done, Louis. That's brilliant. So Louis asks, does the use of TypeScript in Fiori Elements lead to enhanced browser performance compared to JavaScript-based Fiori Elements? That's a very interesting question.
That's a very interesting and maybe even philosophical question. I mean, theoretically, as with all web applications, if you use TypeScript, this is transpiled to JavaScript, and at runtime, there's just a JavaScript code running. So in theory, there's no big performance difference. Of course, there's some transpilation happening because your TypeScript is being rendered into JavaScript, and there might also be some optimizations. Some unnecessary statements or loops that are being optimized. So it might be that there's a small performance gain, but theoretically, it's just the same JavaScript coding run in the end, because TypeScript at runtime doesn't exist. It's only there for build time and developer efficiency.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thanks, Marius. Okay, off you go again.
Okay, then let's start with the second page. As I said, I could have gone the easy way and used object page. Then this would work out of the box and we're saving us some time, but we don't want to. So let's add a custom page on the passenger entity and let's call this details. We do see that a new view and controller is being created, and also the navigation already went through. So now we are on the details page. Again, it doesn't have any content, so not a lot to see here, but I want to actually change this. So let's go into the view, and just to see whether it works, I want to just display the first name. I will use a building block again, which is the field building block, which displays a field of an entity and also sets the type correctly. As I also have Fiori tools and the UI5 language support here, I can just start typing that I want to have the field building block. I think it needs an ID. Yeah, very nice ID without typos. And I will need a meta path, which will be first name. I think that it should even be okay already. Okay, we don't see a first name here because it's a new passenger. But if we go to an existing one, we do see the first name. And honestly, I'm already annoyed by all the pressing back and navigating. So I want to have my pages displayed next to each other. That's also what we saw in the screenshot in the slides. That's called flexible column layout. Doing this manually can be quite the work because you also have to make sure that contexts are synchronized, that you always show the correct context and so on. With Fiori elements and Fiori tools, it's really just one click. Let's go back to the page map. And we cannot just see pages, create pages, but also change options or properties of pages. So let's select flexible column layout. And it's refreshed now, and now we see it coming up on the right side. So now this is already there out of the box. We can also increase the size. We won't need it because the detail page is pretty easy. And we see that it shows the correct first name always, and it also shows nothing on a new object. What you might have seen by now is, I mean, if I have a draft, I want to be able to display data as well, edit data as well, not only display it. On active entities, it's okay to only display, but here I want to edit. Right now, the mode being edit or display is not being changed. So we have to do some kind of implementation to say, okay, if our binding context changes, I also want to change the edit mode. And let's do this as the next step. I will go back to the details view to register some event handler, which is I think called model context change. And this time I'm copying this so I don't mistype again. And in my details controller, it's the same controller, it extends controller, it's TypeScript. I can again have an async function, which returns just an empty promise. And now I want to get the current binding context, see if it is an active entity, and if yes, put the page to edit mode, otherwise put it to display mode. So let's get the context, which we can get using the view, get binding context. Then let's get is active entity. That's kind of the property for draft handling, which is always on the object to see whether it is active or not. So let's pick our context and say request. Actually, we can't do it yet because we have to tell TypeScript that this is a v4 context because it has some more features. Let's just do this right here. Request property is active entity. Then let's just say if is active entity is not undefined, meaning it is defined, it's either true or false, then we want to set the edit mode. In Fiori elements, you can use the UI model to set this. So let's just get the view, get the model, which is called UI. And we have to cast it as well because it is a JSON model. And UI model dot, I think it is set property, yes. The property is called editable. And we will set it to the negation of is active entity. So when the object is active, we don't want to make it editable. If it is inactive, we want to make it editable. By the way, you're seeing me doing a lot of typecasts. That's to show TypeScript that we have a specific implementation of the context or the model. And it's also me being lazy because this is actually optional. And now I'm telling TypeScript, hey, this is definitely defined, which is definitely an anti-pattern. You don't want to do that in productive code. There you also want to have error handling to see, okay, what happens if the model is not defined, the view not defined, the context not defined. But yeah, let's just ignore this for now. Should be okay like that. Okay, let's go back to the application and navigate. This actually didn't work. So maybe let me refresh. See what I also need to await this. I'm doing a request property because we cannot assume that the data is already on the front end. It might have to be loaded, so we need to await this also. Okay. Yeah, that's better. So now if we go into an active entity, it is read-only. And once we go into a editable draft thing, then we get a field that is editable. It's still very sad to have just one small field here. It doesn't even have a label. We are not sure what to do with this. So let's give some love to the details page as well. This is a custom page, and I also want to use the opportunity to use a custom layout that we usually don't have on the object page, which is the wizard. And we can do this in the details view. I'm just adding it down here. We can just use the SAP wizard control, because this is your blank canvas. You can do what you want. You can use building blocks, which is nice. We'll also do that. But you can also use normal controls or layout and things, whatever you want to do, even your custom controls. This will have an ID. Wizard, yes. And this, we can already set some things. We can set the finish button text to save, because whenever the wizard is finished, we want to save the entry. We want to have an event handler when it's finished. I'm going to call this on save press. I also want to set the render mode to page, because I like it more, and the height to auto, so that it doesn't take up all the space. This wizard, for my use case, should have 3 different steps. We can directly define them. I'm just duplicating this line to create 3 nice steps, maybe some new lines in between. And we can already add some content to the first one. I will just move the field. It will get better, I promise, but just to see that it works. And let's also already give it a title. We can call it general. Good, let's see if it works. Yes, we do have this field, and we have 2 empty pages, and then we can press on save. It's kind of weird right now, because it also shows up for active entities, and it doesn't make sense to have this wizard entry, data entry, if we just want to see all the data on the first glance. We don't have to change data or have a process of maintaining it. So I want to actually hide the wizard control whenever we are not in edit mode. And we can do that by just adding a visible binding to the UI model. We already know this model is editable. So going back to the page, now we see nothing. So we also need an alternative. We need to have a display mode. And I will be very lazy here and just paste this in. This is just a VBox. We have a visible binding to the negation of is editable. So whenever we are in display mode, we display this. And we have 3 forms, this time just displayed next below each other with the same content. Yeah, so now in read-only mode, we see 3 forms. They're all driven by metadata, and we can just use the form building block. And now we only have to also set this form in the wizard as well, because the wizard still only has this field, while in read-only we already have the forms. But we can easily do that if we copy the form and replace the field. Actually, I have a slight variation here, which is the wizard, general wizard form, and we don't need a title in this case. And let's just copy this over. That's quicker. Wizard general, the second one will be, in our scenario, I already have it prepared. It will be address. And we can also set the title to address.
You want to add the second D in address there in the meta path.
Oh, thank you. There. It would have been interesting to debug this, but thank you. That's better. And also here. And for the third one, I do have some contact information field prepared. So let's say we do also want contact details. And also add a title. Okay, just like that, we also did this in the wizard. Now we do have 3 forms which are all editable in 3 different steps, and we can use this to maintain data. So I could now maintain myself. Go to the next step. You don't have to tell you my address, but I can tell you I'm in Germany. And yeah, it's just any address. And then we can press on save. Save doesn't work yet. It doesn't just work out of the box. It's just the complete or finish button from the wizard controls. So we do have to implement this. But once we implement this, this should work. And we are going back and hiding the wizard and then showing the read-only mode as we do it here at the display mode. So let's start with implementing the save button, I would say. I'm going back to the coding. I'm maybe doing a quick formatting. Yeah, that's better, I think. And we have an on-save press function we want to implement. Let's go into my details view, details controller. This is an asynchronous function again, which returns a promise. And in here, I want to, again, use the extension API to not create a new document, but save a document. So let's just do this. Again, we're using the edit flow, and we can call save document. We, of course, need to know what to save. So it expects the context to be there. We already know how to get the context. So let's just get the view, get binding context, and it is before context. And then we can pass this in, await. And I also want to add two small helper functions, which just help us to first reset the wizard to the first step, because if we press save on the third step, we don't want the next object to also start on the third step. So I will add a function reset wizard. It's very easy, just gets the wizard and sets the first step. And I also want to refresh the table also from this page. So that's what we can also do here. Importing all things. So let's just call these helper functions. Okay, let's see how this looks like, if it works. My data is still there because the mock data is persisted in memory. If I go to the third step, press on save, we now see that I'm here in the read-only mode. The form building blocks are also in display mode. So we can now, at a quick glance, see my data. And whenever I create a new passenger, I will be able to, again, get into edit mode and maintain new data. Of course, that's not really it yet. We're still missing some state transition things. For example, I might want to cancel an existing draft or reset to active, or I want to edit a active entity so that I can change the data again. So for this, I want to add two simple buttons to the bottom of my details view. I could have probably also put this into the footer, but let's just do it here. I want to have an edit button with the text edit, and also the press handler on edit press, and again some styling. And I also want to have a cancel button, the text cancel, press on cancel, and again cancel button style like this. Okay, yeah, it's emphasize and reject. It's just some nice stylings here. So this is how the buttons are supposed to look like here. Actually, I only want, of course, one to be displayed, so I don't want to have both in display mode and both in edit mode. So let's make sure to only show the edit if we are in display mode and the cancel if we are in edit mode. We already know how to do that. It's just visibility bindings. But the edit button, we need an expression binding here, which is UI is editable. And for the cancel button, it's the other way around. So it's just UI is editable. Okay, so now we have the cancel button in the wizard, and we have the edit button whenever we are not in the wizard. The functionality is not there, unfortunately. That's something we will have to do, but let's directly jump into it. I do have the press handlers again defined. I will again copy this. I don't want typos today. And the pattern is something that we are already familiar now with. We can get the current context, binding context, and then we can use the extension API, which is edit flow again, and in this case, edit document, pass in the context, do a resetting of the wizard and a refreshing of the table. And a nice formatting. Good. See if the edit works. It does. So see if this data is also synced. So if I change the name in tab, we already see the draft data around here. So this is synced. And if I press on save, it is persisted. Great. So edit works as well. Now the only thing left to do for us is cancel. So let's do the same for cancel. we need to get the context. Finding context. Again, ignoring all the optionals. Don't do this. And getting the edit flow. And we can call cancel document on our context. This complains because there's actually a second parameter that's required, which is parameters. The reason for this is, and we already see the two properties we can set, which is control or skip discard popover. The reason for this is that we can get a popover if we change data to warn the end user that the data will be deleted. You also see the same on the object page from Fiori Elements. I actually want to reuse this because why not? For this, I have to provide a control, which we can use as relative position for the popover. So as control, I will just use the source of the event parameter, which is also passed to us. Let's get the event. And afterwards, I want to, again, reset and refresh. Okay, let's go back to our app. It's always really refresh in the background. That's very nice tooling. I don't really have to wait. It's just there instantaneously. And now let's try to edit this one again. Removing the, or doing an S again. It is saved, but if I press on cancel, it also shows me this popover. Actually, it's called discard. That's kind of inconsistent what I did now, but it doesn't really matter from the naming. Let's press on discard, and the data is discarded. But if I edit it and I want to actually have it saved, I can go through the wizard and press on save. Also for a new object, this should work. I mean, I'm already there, but let's do it again. One thing that I also want to show you, because we're using forms, which are itself using fields, which are based on metadata and types, we don't just have different type fields we can show, but we also have more advanced features like value helps. And you see this icon here, which is a value help. So we can just open this to see all the existing countries and regions. Or we can even use a type ahead to to directly select maybe Germany as well. Okay, I think with this, the logic itself is quite good, except the thing that you just saw, it's kind of buggy. The reason for this is whenever I cancel something, we try to show the active entity behind the draft, which works fine if we have an active entity, which is not working if we have a new draft that doesn't have an active entity yet. So to solve this issue, I just want to say, okay, whenever we cancel a new draft, I will just close the right side and go back to the main page. That's relatively simple for us to do. We just need to check if the current entity has an active entity, and we can do it the same way we also get is draft entity. We can say context request property has active entity. And then after everything is done, we just say, okay, if it does not have an active entity, we will navigate back to the main page, thus closing the right side. Navigating is also a question you can ask yourself how to do that in UI5. In our case, we can again use the extension API because there's way more than edit flow. And I want to get the routing and use the navigate to route function to go to the main page. And I think this is also async, so let's await this as well. So now let's check the logic. Whenever I have a new object, press on cancel, it is closed with a nice animation. Whenever I edit something, it's not closed. So yeah, great. Even better, I think this is already something which makes sense to do and to show, to even get first feedback on how it should be better. Of course, there are small things we can improve, but I think we've seen that just in a few minutes, I don't know, like 30, 40 minutes, we were able to create a new app from scratch, 2 pages, both custom layouts, but we are able to reuse as much as possible from Fiori Elements. We have building block usage, which allow us to have consistent enterprise-ready controls there, just ready for us to use. And we're even reusing some TypeScript logic in the background for the edit flow. Actually, what we did was only glue code to put all of this together. So it was very, very easy for us to do. Before I finish with this presentation, I want to have another quick look at the FPM Explorer, because this is more than just building blocks, actually. We saw a building block sample now. But you can also have a look at extension points. If you're using a floor plan, and in most cases you will be using a floor plan, you can use this to have a look at how to do a custom section, a custom column, and so on. There's also the controller extensions, which help you with reusing some logic in TypeScript or JavaScript. In our case, there's also a description of the edit flow, or there's even a sample which shows draft handling on custom pages, exactly the APIs we used. So this is also nice to check out with this and play around. And there are also some advanced features you can use, like side effects, validations, value helps. There are also live running samples, quick bites you can go through and to understand those advanced features as well. Let's go back to the building blocks, because there's one more thing I want to reuse. There are a lot of hidden gems here, I would say, a lot of also smaller things that help you just making your app a little better. I want to especially reuse the flexible column layout actions, because we do have a flexible column layout. And usually, I can also open the sample. We don't have enough space here, but we also have usually those actions up here, which can be used to close the page. And that's also what I want to have consistency. So let's just grab it from here, open our details view, and I will define some header content. Just put it here. It's complaining it wants an ID. I'm not doing that now. Sorry. And the buttons are there. So they weren't there before. I didn't show you, but trust me, they weren't there before. I can now close the page, open a new page. I can even put this to full screen, exit the full screen. So now it's even better integrated, and it's really just using one statement without anything at all, just one building block. And the integration behind the scenes works automatically. So I think now this is even better. I'm not talking too much about stylings here. There's a lot to do, but the logic and the functionality itself is there. So with this, I want to quickly go back to my slides before I finish this off, and show you 3 very important takeaways for you. SAP Fiori Elements and SAP Fiori Tools accelerate app development for every use case. That's really the thing. You don't have to use floor plans. You can go completely custom. That's what I did. I created 2 new pages which don't look like Fiori Elements floor plans, but they still behave the same way and use the same logic behind the scenes. You can, of course, use floor plans, and you can also mix it together. And also, that's what I would recommend. If this was a productive application, I would have probably used the list report or object page, because then it's just way easier to create. It would have been a few clicks only, or a few minutes. It's way easier to maintain, and we also get updates once the floor plans get better themselves. But here, you can also go completely custom. You don't have to use floor plans. There's native support for modern development tooling and TypeScript. Most of this worked behind the scenes, but we have had a very seamless TypeScript integration. We could use modern development syntax. We have all the tool chains, tsconfig, all the middlewares, everything there for us to just get started with TypeScript. In Visual Studio Code, you can also plug in any other tools. There's a big open source community with UI5 and CDS plugins that you can just directly use here. Last but not least, reuse what you can, leave what you can't. You can reuse a lot of things. You can also use, as I said, floor plans, controller extensions, building blocks, other things, flexible column layout. But you don't have to. You're not forced into any patterns. You can do whatever you want to do, and you can even grow as you go. So you can decide you start with nothing. You don't use Fiori elements at all. But then you might find this use case where you still want to have a building block, or you want to do some routing functionality, or you want to use a floor plan because maybe the object page fits perfectly in there. You're free to do as you want. You just have to get started somehow. And with this, I thank you very much for listening in. You see my contact details here as well, my email address, my LinkedIn, my GitHub. Feel free to reach out if you have problems or questions or want to discuss some use cases. Always interesting for us also to see what the community is up to, how we can make it better for everyone. And the coding that I just created, I will create a repository on GitHub probably the next days or next week. So you can also try it out locally, check it out. And yeah, you don't have to start from scratch as well. And with this, DJ, I think we're ready for questions, if there's anything.
Tremendous. Thank you so much, Marius. So in the chat, the chat's been great. The questions have been great. We've got one question coming up for you, Marius, on the values of the metapath attributes, but we'll come to that shortly. When you mentioned being lazy, I couldn't resist adding the quote about the 3 key attributes of a great programmer: laziness, impatience, and hubris, from Larry Wall, of course. And I think I'm minded to sort of summarize this presentation, this session, but also the TypeScript tooling with Fiori Elements, but with another quote from Arthur C. Clarke: "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And I think that is a very relevant quote for me, having seen what you've presented today. So absolutely fantastic. And yeah, some great questions as well while you went on. You've answered some of them. In fact, Luis asked another question about TypeScript, but that was beautifully answered, I would say, by Marianne. So it leaves me to recount this question from Arun about the meta path values. So Arun says, are the annotations specified in the meta path of the macros, are they defined somewhere in the annotations.cds file, or is it coming from CAP? Also, where can I find this code later for my reference? Now that, of course, you've preempted that part of the question. You're going to release this code in a few days' time. But can you address the query about the meta path values?
Yeah, I can even quickly show it. You will also see it once I have the repository, and you can click around and play around with it. But basically, what we have, this is coming from the metadata coming from CAP, and it is coming from CAP and the CDS files, because the CDS files is the way to integrate metadata into CAP. I already prepared it up front here so that we don't have to care about the backend too much. But if you look at our annotations, and we have one app CDS file here especially, this has the line item annotations, the field groups, all the things that we used. You can see here, you can change. I just prepared it up front to make it easy as possible and understandable as possible. By the way, the Fiori tools also support changing the annotations. So if you have a list report, for example, and want to add a new field, you can also just do it in the page map. You don't have to mess with CDS. In this case, I haven't shown that because I'm now using custom floor plans, but there's also more for you to do there and change the metadata yourself as well. Yeah, but I will also upload this, and you can see the CDS files as well, run this locally as well.
Great answer. Great answer. Thank you. And thanks for the question as well, Arun. So a user by the name of Kurzma, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. This is a lot more general question, not really related to what you've just shown. However, I think it's a very good question. So maybe either you or I or anybody in the chat can answer this. So they say, I'm a full stack developer with TypeScript, and I always wanted to learn to be SAP SuccessFactors developer. Do you have any advice for me for where I should start?
Yeah, that's really a general question. I'm also not in like the development of SuccessFactors itself, so it's hard for me to give something where to start it here. I don't know, DJ, do you have any information?
Yeah, I can make some suggestions. There are there is SuccessFactor documentation on help.sap.com. Some of that is developer documentation. So I would start with a combination of two things. I would start with looking at that documentation on help.sap.com to get a feel for what sort of points and what sort of value add a developer can bring to the SuccessFactors arena or ecosystem. But I would also go straight to the ui5.sap.com website, which has a wealth of information on front-end development. By the way, I put the link to the building blocks part of the Flexible Programming Model Explorer in the chat as well. So that's where I'd go and start to play around with that to see the sorts of things that you can do. Combine that with what you can pick up from the documentation in SuccessFactors. There is also, for example, a community talking about SuccessFactors, development extensions, and so on. One person that comes particularly to mind, and Matt may confirm this as well. God, his name's completely gone out of my head. Matt, help me out. Who's my goodness me. Oh my goodness me. Oh, when I remember the name, I'll put it in the comments to the this entry on Devtoberfest. Matt, what's his name? He's going to kill me forgetting his name. But anyway, follow this person, and he will lead you by looking at what he writes. He will lead you to the different places that you need to hang out to learn more. And as soon as this session ends, I'll remember his name. But anyway, okay. Did anybody else in the chat want to help answer that question? He's an SAP mentor. I can't believe it. It's my old brain. I can't remember his name.
We'll come to you once it's over, probably.
Yeah. Okay, I think I hope that helps a little bit with you getting started there, Charisma. Yeah, we wish you good luck and everything. So I don't think there's any more questions. It's been a great session. Thank you again so much to Marius for showing us this, but also thank you to everybody for attending. We've had a great attendance, great chat, great conversation, great questions. So don't forget, in 2 hours' time, we have another Devtoberfest session. Craig Schmayhill is going to tell us about the new home for SAP community. I'm sort of pedaling wildly underneath and talking nonsense. So hopefully I can remember the guy's name, but I can't remember his name. Oh my God. Yeah. I'll put it in the chat when I remember. Okay. So I'll say goodbye. I'm going to hand over to Marius to say goodbye. That's it. Goodbye from me.
Yeah. Also, thank you so much for listening. Also, DJ, for having me here. It's always interesting and always nice to hear from the community as well. As said, reach out to me if there's anything you want to share, you have problems, or you can also add comments to the comment section. We will watch them as well. And yeah, I will send the coding to GitHub and then have fun with it. And I wish you all a great rest of the day.